video on the horizontal line test and the one-to-one property. The definition of the horizontal line test, you've already been familiar with the vertical line test. If you remember the vertical line test, I'm going to use VLT for short, the vertical line test identifies if you have a function. It passes the vertical line test. So for example, if I have a parabola that looks like this, the parent function, imagine it touches once, it touches once, it touches once, through all of these, so we can change that y to a function notation, converting it out of a relation to a function. And that's what the vertical line test does. Now we're going to move on to the horizontal line test and identify that. Here is the definition of a horizontal line test. A function is one-to-one if and only if no horizontal line intersects the graph of y equals f in more than one point. So here's an example for you below. So we have this parabola. It opens up. It has a couple points identified. Imagine if we run across horizontally and we get a point of 0, 7, and another point touching at 4, 7. This fails the horizontal line test. It's not one-to-one. This example is not one-to-one because it intersects at 0, 7 and 4, 7. So it fails the horizontal line test. Now what this means for inverses. Every function has an inverse. Okay, I'm going to write that out. Every function has an inverse. And we've gone through what I call the four-step process to find that inverse. What we get out is sometimes an inverse function and sometimes just a relation. So here is what's important. For this example, if we were to find the inverse of this parabola, this quadratic function, the inverse will not be a function. It'll just be a relation. So let's go on to this next slide. Oops. All right, important. For a function, the inverse relation of a function is if and only if one-to-one it passes the horizontal line test, then the inverse will be a function if it passes that horizontal line test. All right, so here's a couple examples. Do these functions, would they create an inverse function or just an inverse relation? So example 1, this is an absolute value function. Imagine it passes the vertical line test, touches every single time. That's great. But now we need to check and see if it passes the horizontal line test. So the horizontal line test goes horizontal, just like it sounds. And we want it to hit only one time. And unfortunately, this hits here and there. So it hits more than one time. It fails the horizontal line test, HLT for short. So what this means is when we go out and find the inverse, we cannot use F inverse notation. It is not a function. It is just a relation, a y equals and whatever we find. So the inverse is not a function, just a relation. So we'd use the letter y in our equation. All right. The second example is a line. It's also a function. It's a linear function. If we imagine all these horizontal lines hitting once, 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 this one does pass the horizontal line test. And we've already gone through in our lesson how to find the inverse of this function. And we've noticed that we replace the y with f inverse notation, and we can do that every time for all these linear functions if it passes the horizontal line test. So therefore, the inverse of this function is also a function. So we can use that f inverse notation. So we would replace that y with f inverse notation.